Hey guys, what's going on? Jeb here, and in today's video, we're going to be doing a little bit of technical analysis on Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency markets, and more specifically, I want to zoom in here to the hourly chart and talk about whether or not Bitcoin is ever going to be breaking the key support level of $4,000, which we are currently sitting just above. Now, I've seen a lot of people say that $4,000 is the bottom, seems that we've bottomed out, and seems that we're not going any lower, and I've also seen many people say that the bottom is far lower than $4,000. I've seen price projections as low as under $500, if you can believe that. Don't think we're going that low, but I don't necessarily think that the bears have an unfounded case when they say we're going to go below $4,000. So in today's video, I figured I'd go ahead and add my 2 cents into the mixture and talk about whether or not I think we're going to break $4,000 or if it's going to hold as an analogous level of support to $6,000 so far as that analogy extends up until $6,000, of course, being broken. But after we discuss Bitcoin, I also want to jump over to some stock market news, and I want to talk about a lot of tech company stocks. We're going to be looking at Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google, many of these other FANG stocks, for example, Facebook. I want to look at a lot of these stocks and bring to your attention, in case you weren't already aware, the major sell-off that we're seeing in the stock market over the last couple of months. Because while Bitcoin isn't really a major enough market to have major ramifications on the global economy, these markets like the S&P 500, obviously the markets that constitute the S&P 500 and the markets that constitute the global economy, the ones that are listed on the NASDAQ, for example, these are the kind of markets that really drive world economies, and they're very important. And I do want to go ahead and talk about this because we are seeing some major sell-offs in some very big names that I'm sure you have heard of, some very big names who you might be watching this video on their product if you're watching on an Apple product, for example. I do want to talk about that because the sell-off that we've seen in traditional finance markets seems to be coloring what Bitcoin has been doing over the last couple of weeks, and I think that's definitely something we want to touch on. But without much further ado, that was a bit of a long intro. Let's go ahead and get right into it. Bitcoin is currently trading at exactly $4,250 at time of recording, as you can see. And like I said, if we zoom in here to the hourly chart, what we're seeing is that Bitcoin is trying to set a little bottom in motion here with $4,000. We came straight down here, entered this bear pennant that we talked about a couple of times, and we broke slightly bearish out of it, but we didn't see as much bearish price action as you might normally see coming from a bear pennant that had this long of a flagpole. That's what you would call that. You normally would see a little bit longer of a downtrend right here, but we did have a strong psychological level of support at $4,000, which Bitcoin was holding. And right now we're trading sideways out of that. That's one of the first things I want to talk about here is the fact that Bitcoin is trading sideways. I'm going to get back to that, but keep that in mind. The fact that Bitcoin has come down here to $4,000 and instead of getting a strong bounce is trading sideways, definitely something interesting that I want to cover. Anyway, let's do the crypto market recap first, and then we'll come back to that. I do want to go ahead and get this out of the way because we like doing this at the beginning of the video. I forgot to do this a couple videos ago and did it at the end. I like doing it at the beginning, though. Anyway, across all exchanges, Bitcoin is currently trading around $4,313.42. Of course, it is going to be a little bit higher on exchanges like Bitfinex, of course, because we still have the whole Tether debacle going on. Bitcoin's down by about 0.25% over the last 24 hours with a daily volume of around $4 billion. I figured after a lot of this sell side pressure evaporated that we would see Bitcoin's daily volume start to come back down and creep back down to 3.5, 4, maybe $4.5 billion on an average day, simply because it was a bearish movement, and there hasn't really been a lot more volume moved back into the space. The only reason we had increased volume was because a major event like $6,000 being broken was happening. XRP is trading just over 40 cents. It's down by a 1.5 percentage point, 2 percentage points over the last 24 hours. Not a great day for XRP. It's not holding up as well as Bitcoin had. XRP is kind of getting some of that sell side pressure that had eluded it for a couple of days because XRP has held up very well, honestly, in this major sell-off that we've seen in Bitcoin. XRP is very far ahead of Ethereum right now. Of course, it has been for a couple of days. Ethereum's actually up by 0.21%, though. They both have a fairly decent daily volume for what they've done in the past. One thing I did want to do is sort by change over the last 24 hours and look at this. We have a couple of imposters sitting up here trying to take the gainer spot. We have Bitcoin Diamond up 20% and then Bitcoin Gold right below it at 11%. There's actually a cryptocurrency that's sitting right here in between Bitcoin Diamond and Quark Chain called Bitcoin Silver, and below that there's Bitcoin Palladium and Bitcoin Iridium, Bitcoin Carbon. I mean, we already have Bitcoin Carbon right here. We got Bitcoin Hydrogen down there. We have a lot of Bitcoin spinoffs here on CoinMarketCap today. But if we zoom down, if we scroll down here on CoinMarketCap, we're going to find that the market is roughly split, probably about 50 cryptocurrencies in the green, maybe 50 in the red. Definitely a rather split day, as you can see as we're scrolling up here. Perhaps more red than green only by a small margin, maybe 60-40 here. And we do still see that there are 3 double-digit losers in Metaverse ETP, Monocoin, and ODEM, all down by over 10%. Anyway, I do believe that was everything we wanted to touch on in today's video, but since we're going to be talking about stocks later on, I want you to remember this number right here. This number right here, in case you for some reason are not familiar, if you are, welcome to cryptocurrency. You got in at a really weird time. That is the market capitalization of the entire cryptocurrency market. Right now, the entire cryptocurrency market is worth about $140 billion. We'll say 140 for simplicity. And Bitcoin is worth $750 billion, $75 billion market cap. I'll explain why I mentioned that later on in the video. But let's go ahead and get back onto what I was talking about earlier about why it's a little strange and perhaps disconcerting that Bitcoin is trading sideways here. The reason that this is a little disconcerting becomes very obvious if we come back out here to the 4-hour and look at February 6th of 2018. And if you guys know what I'm talking about, then you already know where I'm going with this. What we saw when Bitcoin initially started the bear market, ran up to $20,000 and started correcting hard all the way down to $6,000 as we saw Bitcoin crash and crash and crash and crash and crash for over a month. This was not a very fun time. I could tell you because I lived through it, and I was starting a YouTube channel during it, so it wasn't a great time, but it was definitely interesting and very insightful nonetheless. But what we saw Bitcoin do is when it came down and established a semi-permanent bottom, I only say semi-permanent bottom for $6,000 because it has been broken, although it was a very strong bottom that did hold for like 10 months. We came down and set this semi-permanent bottom of $6,000, and one of the ways that we could tell that it was a very strong bottom is because of the very strong bounce. We saw Bitcoin come down here very, very quickly, got overextended on the RSI. If memory serves correct, we went just a little below 30. We went to like 29 or so. Of course, I've looked at this market a ton. If we come down here, it went down to about 27 at the time. We saw Bitcoin correct rather hard. My point is that when Bitcoin came down and hit that level that Bitcoin was going to hold for a very, very long time, what did it do? It had a very strong bounce at the same time that it was oversold on RSI. That's very, very important because when we're doing technical analysis on a current market, we only have so much data. We have to look back at previous markets to see how the market has reacted to certain situations and then extrapolate out and try and get an idea of what the market will do next time. And one thing that concerns me about the current market is that if we were looking at an analogous movement like this, then why hasn't Bitcoin gotten a stronger bounce yet, guys? Bitcoin coming down to $4,000, if that was analogous to $6,000 right here, we should have gotten a bounce. We should have gotten a very strong bounce. As you can see, we got a very strong bounce here because Bitcoin lost a lot of valuation. This was a 70% reduction in price action over the span of a month and a half after the major bull run. That was a big deal, of course. I'll give you that. But my point here is that Bitcoin came down, found a level of support that it wanted to try and establish as a long-term level of support, which it did, got oversold on the daily RSI, and got a very strong bounce. There's a very key difference between what happened on February the 6th and what's happening now. Bitcoin has come down to what perhaps, we don't know yet, could be a long-term strong level of support like $4,000. It got very oversold on the RSI. If we come out to the daily chart, of course, I've talked about this. The daily RSI for Bitcoin is very, very low right now, far lower than it was back over here on February the 6th when it went down to 30. February the 6th was the bottom of this market right here. You can see down here when this actually happened. And we haven't seen a strong bounce like we did on February the 6th yet, guys. And that leads me to believe that $4,000 might not be about to hold, simply because we haven't gotten a stronger bounce off of it. Now, one thing I do want to point out with that is that we didn't have as much bearish momentum coming into $4,000 as we did coming into $6,000. Of course, when we ran into $6,000, we just lost 70% of our valuation. But guys, this was no small move either. Bitcoin has lost 35% of its valuation. So my point here is, if $4,000 was going to hold in the long term and it wasn't just a pit stop on the way to lower levels, why haven't we gotten a stronger bounce yet? I'm going to throw that question back to you guys, but I'm going to tell you what it makes me think. It makes me think that $4,000 is going to hold for a little while, perhaps long enough for the daily RSI to correct back up to maybe 30 or 40, perhaps even 50, because you can reset RSI by trading sideways. Perhaps we're going to see something like that, but then I think we're going to go lower. I don't actually think that $4,000 is going to hold permanently. Now, I want to make this very clear. I think it's slightly more likely that $4,000 does break, but I also think that there is a decent chance that $4,000 holds, because I'm still of the mindset that we are far below the underlying intrinsic fundamental value, whatever you want to call it, for Bitcoin that I've harped on so much with you guys. I still think that's somewhere up here. I still think we're way below that. Right now, we're far below mining costs, for example. We're far below what I think Bitcoin should actually be valued at. But the technicals are the ones that we have to look at the most. The fundamentals are, I've talked about this before, the fundamentals are like a gravitational attraction that will gradually pull the market in the direction of them, but they're not going to be as quick and snappy of movements based on the fundamentals as you will see on the technicals. And right now the technicals are not looking all that strong for $4,000, to be totally honest. We do still see that the MACD, for example, is rather bearish. It is closing in. The histogram is curving up a little bit. We might see a bounce on that. I could see Bitcoin holding above $4,000 for a couple of months, guys. But the fact that we didn't see a stronger bounce on it doesn't give me a lot of confidence in it. With that out of the way, I think I've made my point there. Tell me in the comment section down below whether or not you guys think $4,000 is going to hold. I'm interested, as always, to hear your opinions in the comment section down below. Actually, let's do this a little more formally. There will be a poll and the iCard in the top right. Go ahead and click on that. I'm interested. I'm very interested, actually, to see what you guys think, because $4,000 is a decent price level. But if we were to go ahead and follow the bear market of 2014 and 2015 and try and get an idea of where Bitcoin will bottom out, then what we saw over here in 2015 is that Bitcoin bottomed out 50% below the level of support analogous to $6,000. So right down here, about 45 or 50% would bottomed out. You can see that right there. So if we were to do the same thing, that would see Bitcoin going down to $3,000, and I could see that happening. I don't necessarily think all the way to 3,000 is the most likely scenario, but I could definitely see Bitcoin going to $3,000. That is definitely not out of the ballpark at this point with how bearish Bitcoin has been. Anyway, I do think I've covered everything for Bitcoin, so I do want to go ahead and jump into the stock market. Now, I know some of you guys like me talking about the stock market. I know some of you guys don't like me talking about the stock market. If you don't want me to talk about the stock market, tell me in the comment section down below, and you can click off the video anytime. But I do think this is very, very important for us to understand, because one of the things about Bitcoin is that Bitcoin is a very small market. A lot of people don't realize how small Bitcoin is, in fact. And the Bitcoin market does not have the kind of sway on the global economy that the stock markets do, especially the US stock markets, which we're going to be looking at today. Bitcoin is simply not large enough. It hasn't been around long enough. The stock markets are very, very old, as you guys know. And Bitcoin is simply not, and Bitcoin doesn't have the kind of cultural integration that the stock market does. It doesn't have everybody's retirement tied up in it, for one, and it doesn't have anywhere near the market capitalization that the stock market does. The stock markets are worth trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars. It's actually kind of insane, and that's why I'm talking about this, because when we see a major sell-off in the stock market, it's not good for the rest of the markets, including Bitcoin. And that's why I'm bringing this up. I'm tying this back into Bitcoin. So if we go ahead and look at the S&P 500 right now, I'm not going to be getting into what all these mean. If you guys aren't familiar with any of the lingo, to keep the video short, I'm going to ask you to Google it. But I do want to go ahead and talk about the S&P 500. The S&P 500 is obviously not a stock. It is an ETF. It's actually an index. But anyway, like I said, not going to get into a bunch of lingo today, but I do want to go ahead and show you the charts here because they're not looking that great. I'm not going to get into a bunch of TA, but I do just want to mainly bring up the sell-offs that we've seen. 2018 has not really been a great year for the stock market. Of course, we've been trading sideways. Now, of course, I always like talking about perspective. Let's get some perspective before we dive into this. The stock markets have been on a bull run since the Great Recession back here in 2008 and 2009. They've been doing extremely, extremely well. We can see what the S&P 500 has done here is rather substantial. You can see we've gone up about 300% in the last decade or so. Not really a great increase for what we would consider in the cryptocurrency markets, but that's not bad for the stock market. That's pretty good, actually. 2018 hasn't been as bullish. We've seen a lot of major sell-offs in 2018. We had this little period right here where we had this kind of ascending triangle right here with the top right here. And we had this kind of loose uptrend right there. And the S&P 500 was rising. We did set a new all-time high a couple of months ago. But ever since then, hasn't been looking that bullish. And we have seen a lot of major sell-offs. And like I said, it's important to understand what the global economy is doing, because a speculative investment like Bitcoin relies heavily on a lot of people having a lot of money that they can throw around. And if people especially the kind of people that would be investing in the Bitcoin market are starting to get screwed in their other investments, they're probably going to start pulling off away from their speculative investments. You know, when you get very, very cold and you get hypothermic, what gets cold first? Your fingers get cold, your toes get cold, your nose gets cold, your extremities get cold. The things that you don't need the most get cold. The same thing happens when you go into a recession and you have a lot of people investing in 20 different markets and they start losing money in every single one of them. They're going to pull money out of the ones that they're least confident in. And a lot of people that are in Bitcoin, or especially that were in Bitcoin a year ago, probably aren't as confident in Bitcoin as they used to be, especially after $6,000 was broken. And that's the key point here, is that if the stock market does continue to do poorly, as it has been for the last several months, that does not bode well for Bitcoin, the speculative investment. That's a really bad sign. We don't want to see that happen. So let's go ahead and run through some major tech companies, especially because a major part of the sell-off is happening in the tech industry. And look at this. And another reason why I'm bringing up the tech industry is because a lot of the people that are going to be investing in Bitcoin probably also the kind of people that are going to be investing in the tech industry. I think we can all agree on that. Let's go ahead and look at AAPL. You guys might have heard of Apple Incorporated. Probably, some of you guys are probably watching this on an Apple device. Apple obviously has not been doing very well. Basically, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to run through several companies that I'm hoping you guys have heard of before. I'm sure you have, Apple being one of them. Over the last couple of months, Apple has lost 25% of its share value. Not a great day for Apple. Apple, by the way, was the first trillion-dollar company. I do believe its market capitalization is back below $1 trillion at this point. But if we go ahead and go into Google and type in market cap of, let's do Apple. We're doing Apple right now. Let's see what Apple's market capitalization is. If you type this into Google, Google will tell you right down here, excuse me, Apple's market capitalization as calculated by Google is currently around $750 billion, which is a ridiculous valuation. That's why I brought up cryptocurrency market capitalization. I asked you to remember it earlier. Total cryptocurrency market capitalization, $140 billion. One company, $750 billion. Apple, at one point, when it was worth $1 trillion, was worth more than all of cryptocurrency had ever been. The all-time high for cryptocurrency market capitalization was, I believe it was about $830 billion. We can go ahead and check that real quick if we want. That is a very, very large amount of money. Don't get me wrong. I'm not discounting how well Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency community has done, especially considering how young the space is. But the fact that we haven't seen a better, the fact that we see that Bitcoin and cryptocurrency markets are still this small in the face of these tech giants does, one, mean that we have a long way to go, and two, it does mean that we need to keep an eye on these and make sure they don't start to collapse. As you can see, the all-time high market capitalization, I said it was around $830 billion. Let me check how close I was to being accurate on that. It was right around 825. Oh, I saw 830. Okay, so I do remember that correctly. That's my point here. Total cryptocurrency market capitalization at its all-time high, granted, was bigger than one company. And granted, Apple is a very large company, but Apple's not the only one. Let's go ahead and go through some other ones. If you've ever heard the term FANG stocks, that's referring to, I believe it's Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. Those are 5 major tech companies that are all worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Netflix is worth like $140 billion, more than all of cryptocurrency right now. Let's go ahead and look at Netflix. I believe Netflix is NFXL. We go ahead and look at NFXL. We can see that Netflix, not doing great. Not really a great year for Netflix either. The year started off pretty well for a lot of these companies, but Netflix has lost 40% of its valuation in the stock market. If we look at Google, I believe it's Google like that, then we can see that Google hasn't been doing very well either. I'm basically just doing a crapshoot right now and showing you guys several different stock market stocks and showing you that they're not doing very well. We can see that Google is down 22%. I can go on and on and on. I can look at Facebook. I can look at Amazon. Let's look at Amazon real quick. Amazon was another, it is another major company. We see that Amazon kind of mirrored the S&P 500 for a long time. It was doing very, very well. And if we zoom out to get a little bit of perspective, you can see that 2018 hasn't really been all that great for Amazon. Of course, the first part was, but in these last couple of months, and like I said, I'm tying this all back into Bitcoin, I'm about to, has not been very bullish for Amazon, nor has it been for the rest of the tech industry. Amazon's down 30% from a recent high in September, which wasn't that long ago. That's a very quick movement in the stock market, which is why a couple of months ago, even like a couple of weeks ago actually, when Bitcoin was trading sideways, everybody was making jokes about how the volatility junkies are leaving cryptocurrency for the stock market because the stock markets were moving and Bitcoin wasn't for once. And that's kind of the interesting thing that we're looking at here is we're looking at a major sell-off in the tech industry. And like I said, that is really not a good thing for Bitcoin. We do not want to see the global economy go into a recession for many different reasons. Of course, I'm sure you guys don't want to know the 2008. If you're old enough to have experienced 2008 and been an adult, it was not a good time. It was a very, very bad time. Even if you're old enough to experience 2001 and back in the early 90s, these were not good times to be alive. I mean, they were good times to be alive. We live in whatever country you live in, somewhere on Earth in the 21st century. It's a very good time to be alive. But compared to what we've seen in the last 10 years, not a great time to be alive economically. We do not want to see another recession come and just sweep the feet out from under Bitcoin at such a vulnerable time. And one of the reasons I'm bringing this up is because the major sell-off that we've seen in stocks over the last several months, starting back over here in like August or July, depending on which stocks you're looking at, I think has had some effect on Bitcoin and the rest of the cryptocurrency industry. Starting probably about here, the stock market especially for technology stocks has not been doing very well. And I did want to bring that up because I think it has been coloring the Bitcoin market a little bit. Perhaps that was the needle that broke the camel's back, the straw that broke the camel's back and brought Bitcoin below $6,000. Perhaps not. But I do think the stock market doing poorly would have an effect on Bitcoin. And I do think the stock market doing very, very well would also have the inverse and opposite effect on Bitcoin. Tell me in the comment section down below, what do you think of that analysis? Do you think that Bitcoin and the stock markets are completely uncorrelated? Do you think Bitcoin is still too small of a market and too international of a market to be impacted in any way, shape, or form by the stock market? Do you think there's some kind of middle ground where you think there's a little bit of impact, but not as much as I'm saying there might be? Or do you agree with me? Tell me in the comment section down below. And also, like I said earlier, tell me in the comment section down below and in the poll in the top right, whether or not you think Bitcoin is going to go below $4,000. I'm very interested to get an actual bit of data from you guys as to whether or not you think Bitcoin is going to go below $4,000, because I've done that in the past, and it actually has been rather useful data for my technical analysis and for the channel. So if you want to join in that, like I said, click the little I in the top right. Anyway, guys, that is going to do it for this video. We've already gone 20 minutes. You guys do like slightly shorter videos because I did do a poll in the past and ask you guys. A lot of people wanted about 10 to 15-minute videos. I will try to be shorter in the future, but I did want to talk about the stock market today, and I probably won't be talking about it for the next, well, until I have another reason to talk about it. So anyway, I hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you did enjoy the video, definitely consider dropping a like, hitting that subscribe button, smashing the notification bell, because I have heard reports, of course, you've probably heard every other YouTuber say this, I have heard reports of people saying that my videos don't show up in your sub box. So if you want to be notified whenever a new video comes out, hit that little bell icon right next to the subscribe button down in the doobly-doo, as a certain YouTuber would say, and we'll go ahead and give you notifications for new videos. Anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this video. I do want to thank each and every single one of you for watching, as always, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.